So this is Magna Carta, the Great Charter. We like to think of this document as being one of the cornerstones of our Western democracy. It's a document that speaks about inalienable rights to liberty. And in some ways that's true, because it does contain a critical clause, nullus liber homo, no free man. And goes on to talk about protection from imprisonment, from the seizure of property, and a right to an appeal to a panel of your peers or recourse to the law. There's a beautiful irony to this document, because the people who are at the heart of Magna Carta, the forging of this agreement, were knights. And we tend to think of that group as men who were warriors, who were bloodthirsty, rapacious warlords. And yet here we find them right at the heart of a great charter of liberty. But in many ways, this document in 1215 was actually about something much more specific. It was about the relationship between John and his leading nobles.
The collapse of the Angevin Empire and John's rapacity had prompted knights, men who were accustomed to winning their status through warfare, to talk the language of law and governance. But it would be wrong to imagine that the drafting of this document ushered in a period of enduring peace.
In 1215, what we really had is an agreement that's much more along the lines of a peace treaty. A series of conditions that are ironed out through negotiation between John and his nobles, with William Marshall right at the heart of those dealings, that are essentially there to produce a truce. And in fact, that truce only lasts for a few months. Certainly by the end of that year, 1215, Magna Carta, as it then stood, was essentially a dead letter.
The Magna Carta that survived to influence English and world history was not published by King John, but it was issued after his death the following year, and under another seal.
This is a version of Magna Carta sealed by Lectoris Nostri et Regni Nostri, our guardian and the guardian of our realm. And that man is named William Marshall.
It's the clue to the last act of William's life, one that would stamp William's seal in our history forever, as the man who saved the kingdom. Back in 1213, William had been called out of semi-retirement. As John's barons left him one by one, he had summoned the man in the kingdom most famed for old-fashioned loyalty. The Marshal was now 69, an old man by the standards of his day, and carried huge respect on both sides. It was he who had helped to engineer the negotiations that led to Magna Carta. But for all William's efforts, John's power as a monarch could not be salvaged, and his kingdom was overrun by the rebels, this time with the help of Louis, Prince of France. Soon half the kingdom was in foreign hands, and William found himself once again burying a king. On the 18th of October 1216, the war still raging, John died, the broken king of a broken kingdom.
The moment of King John's death in 1216, England was in utter turmoil, ripped apart by civil war. 2/3 of the English aristocracy had turned their back on the Angevin royal dynasty. And with the arrival of an invasion force under the French Prince Louis, more than half of the realm had been lost, including the vital commercial centre of London. So who was the heir to this kingdom on its knees? Well, it was John's son, Henry, a boy of just 9 years of age. His prospects could not have been bleaker.
The child king was brought up from his sanctuary in Wiltshire, and all eyes turned to the Marshal, the most revered man in England, and the boy's only hope.
William raced south to meet the young Henry on the road. The meeting that followed was deeply emotionally charged. The boy was so small and vulnerable that he actually had to be carried by one of his household knights. he approached the marshal, pleading for his protection, saying, "I give myself over to God and to you." William responded by pledging himself to serve Henry so long as he was able. At this moment, everyone wept, the marshal included.
The old man knelt before his 9-year-old sovereign. The fates of both were now inextricably linked.
This was, I think, the most important decision of William Marshall's life. The moment at which he gambled everything, backing a boy who seemed doomed to failure. It was said that William promised that he would support Henry no matter what. Even if all the rest of the world deserted him, he would carry the young boy on his shoulders from land to land, begging for food and bread if he had to. By this choice, William put his family, his dynasty, the lands that he had gained on the line. There was a very real possibility that his dynasty, that his future, would come to an end when Henry III failed as a king.
William now accepted the honour, but also the burden of England's regency. So why did he take this risk? We can never know, but perhaps we can look for an answer in his conception of chivalry.
He did not want to be shamed, he did not want to damage his reputation. He wanted to be seen to do the honourable, chivalric thing, the thing that a knight of his status should do.
In the end, William may have made a calculated, self-serving decision to preserve his good name, or acted out of an authentic sense of loyalty to the crown. Whatever the case, William now found himself at the front line of a war that would determine the fate of England. In May 1217, William, at the age of 70, drew up his forces outside Lincoln, intent on striking a decisive blow against the rebels and the French.
It was said that he delivered a rousing speech to his men, claiming that the invading French were bent upon total destruction. "Fight with unbreakable resolve," he urged, "for the sake of your loved ones, for our land, and to win the highest honour."
This man, as much Norman as English, a man once defined by his class, not his nation, had now issued an emotional appeal grounded in English identity. And it was William's decision to place himself at the heart of the fighting here in Lincoln, despite his old age, that inspired the Royal Army to victory.
If this battle had played out differently, we'd be looking at an England that would suddenly be part of the Kingdom of France. Our future as a nation would have been entirely different. And it's Lincoln that means that what we now think of as the royal line, the English royal line, survived as we know it. In the end, it was a knight who could achieve this success. For all the romanticism or the mythology that surrounds ideas of chivalry, it's still true to say that the greatest of knights, men like William Marshall, could shape history.
William served as regent for a further 2 years before old age took him. But in that time he sought to settle and stabilise England, the England of Magna Carta, reissued under his seal. William Marshall died in a different England to the one in which he'd been born, but it was a country that he had been instrumental in shaping. For centuries thereafter, England would be ruled by kings, supported, but also checked by a warrior aristocracy. And the ideals they hammered out on the tournament field, in the politics of the court, in the blood of civil war, and ultimately in Magna Carta, formed the basis of the principles by which we are all now governed. And for me, this is the greatest revelation of William Marshall's life.
He is, I think, emblematic of a period in which knights became more than mere agents of conquest. It was William and knights like him who stemmed the tide of royal tyranny, who promoted the rule of law. Of course, most did so in pursuit of their own interests, but nonetheless, they helped to create the country in which we now live.
We begin Ken Burns'